What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and it's Top 10 Thursday. You know, I was just sitting here thinking about the fact that it's kind of interesting that there's so many thousands of good things to play now that it's sort of impossible to see everything. No matter what, you're gonna overlook something weird, obscure, and epic like every Extend Extra. But I still think that it's kind of fun to try and find the really cool stuff that nobody else is talking about. So today, I want to try and honor the absolutely amazing franchises that are so obscure that some of them I'm certain you've never even heard of. These are my picks of the top 10 best games no one plays. Number 10. Darksiders. Imagine for a second if a team of developers that were extremely talented decided to come together and make their own very twisted version of something like The Legend of Zelda, a game that's going to have open world exploration and really cool puzzles, and on top of that, some really sharp combat. That's essentially what Darksiders is, but it never really seemed to get the mainstream appeal that it needed to stay successful. You're playing as War, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, trying to stop the end of the world instead of cause it. These games are so gory and overall so fun, but for some reason just didn't catch on the way they'd like. While we are getting a third game, I'm very curious if anybody is even going to bother buying it. Number 9. Zero Escape. A man awakens in a dark room, not knowing how he got there. Nearby, there are others, but are they friend or foe? He isn't exactly certain. This is how each of the Zero Escape games begin, but from there, they escalate dramatically. They're all based on a simple premise, something called the decision game, where basically, you're going to have to choose who lives and who dies. The only way to get out of this terrible trap is to essentially go through a series of really twisted gauntlets, and the last man standing is the winner who gets to leave. No matter what though, somebody has to die. It is your choices that end up navigating you through this really gory and really puzzling experience. And I really like that each of the Zero Escape games actually connect. They could have done it like a crappy Saw movie and just had them as these little standalone pieces, but there is an overarching narrative that creates this entire landscape of torture, mayhem, and some really good story. Number 8. Titanfall. There were so many bad decisions made involving this series. I bet at this point, many of you have never even tried it, despite the fact that they got great review scores, and everybody who actually played them realized that these are some of the tightest and deepest shooters ever made. There were so many problems around it though, like exclusivity or just really bad launch windows, that ended up making it where a lot of people just frankly didn't notice them. I ended up buying both Titanfall 1 and 2 slightly after launch, and at that point, the servers were already starting to become very vacant. And now, at this point, I know they all want to make a Titanfall 3, but the chances of it seem downright impossible, which is such a shame because these are fantastic. Number 7. Panzer Dragoon. Occasionally, I see a game that's so bizarre I don't understand exactly what it's all about, where it just tries to combine so many different far-out concepts that the game, on the surface, seems like it wouldn't even function. One of those was obviously Panzer Dragoon, a game that is sort of like an on-rails shooter where you're just flying along and shooting things that are flying around you, but simultaneously, it manages to do something that no other game in the genre has done, which is have a serious story at the heart of it. It seems like the developers realized that a good world would keep people motivated to keep coming back, so they hired some really good writers to make something that's unlike anything else I've ever seen before. I thought that there were so many great touches, like really cool 3D cutscenes and some actual heart and soul at the core of something that could have been really paper thin. But unfortunately, at this point, even trying to find these games can be very expensive since they didn't sell, they didn't print a bunch, and now they're just gone. Number 6. Grandia. These games almost feel like a classic Square Enix project from the 90s that went on to be completely undiscovered. Now, the thing that's the best about these is the combat system, which allows you to very much choose the flow of combat and how it happens. Essentially what it does is, as you hit enemies, it will stall their next attack, making it where you can strategize if you want to stop somebody from healing or try and dish out your own massive hit, which can actually be interrupted by their strikes. It sort of creates this drum beat where you're constantly trying to match the pace and rhythm of that next big hit. And you know what? I love it so much. Number 5. Persona. Very recently, these projects have finally started to get a little bit of attention, with the 5th entry actually selling a couple million units. But if you look at its long past, for the most part, this is an extremely obscure franchise. I mean, just look at something like the random sales numbers of some of the early games. You can't even find them because it just sold so badly, which is a shame because I think that Persona did something that was very smart and nobody else was doing, which is that it listened to its core fan base and just tried to keep the ultra-hardcore fans very happy, making some role-playing games that are deeper, more complicated, and personally, I think way better than any of the competition. And I'm glad that now, just in the last year, it's getting the recognition that it so badly deserves. Number 4. Syphon Filter. It's a real shame when there's a series that's based on a really good idea, but it never seems to take off the way it really should. And that's unfortunately what happened with Syphon Filter. These were, in a way, sort of like a different version of Metal Gear Solid with a lot more action and a lot less talking. They were games that had some good sneaking and some great stealth and some really cool moments of trying to creep around in evil labs and uncover giant government plots. But it also had lots and lots of combat where you're running around shooting people and shooting giant tasers. And as it went on and became a good game for the PS2 and eventually the PSP, I think that it just really managed to refine what it did best. It really managed to hone in on the expert aiming and really cool plot lines that were at the center of all this epic action. But the real disappointment of it is just the fact that as these games improved, it never seemed like their numbers of sales managed to match its absolute epicness. Number 3. Dot Hack. Labels can be very dangerous. If you're working on a project that doesn't exactly fit into a single genre, but it ends up getting stuck with a label that just manages to write it off, it can end up dooming an entire series before it has a chance to truly really freaking explode. And that is, in my opinion, what happened with Dot Hack. Now, these games managed to get a little bit of praise because, well, in my opinion, they're really good. They all have some really good hack and slash combat and cool customization and some great really meta elements that were a commentary on gaming and online culture in general. The problem is that right from the start, people just kind of dismiss them as anime games or really simplistic hack and slashers, when in actuality, they're very complex and have some very diverse gameplay styles built into them. This series goes on really far and even got some Japanese exclusive games that are truly the pinnacle of the entire franchise. But most people will never know that because at this point, Dot Hack is long dead. Number 2. Dishonored. Sometimes a game ends up just absolutely failing so hard that it leaves me scratching my head because I'm one of the few people who ended up playing it and falling in love with what it was. And Dishonored is certainly an example of that. These are stealth games that are borderline flawless because they manage to do some really complex level design and put you in some really hard situations and only leave you alone to try and figure out how you can survive them. I love each and every one of the first 2 games and their DLC, but at this point, even the developers have realized that it's just not a franchise that's ever going to make a profit. Just this week, they sadly released a statement that at this point, Dishonored has finally been put to bed. Number 1. Yakuza. Have you ever had one of those situations in life where you suddenly stumble upon something way after everybody else and you just completely fall in love with it? It seems like this giant secret that people knew about and you just never actually heard. That is how I feel about Yakuza. These games, each and individually, are masterpieces. They manage to combine some really chaotic storytelling with side quests that are so bonkers you would not believe them if I didn't show them to you, and martial arts that is so freaking fun I ended up just wandering up and down streets getting in fist fights for hours and hours and hours even if I didn't need to level up. Every single facet of the Yakuza games seem like they would be giant bestsellers because they have so many different elements that people seem to get obsessed with, but it just doesn't. I am constantly baffled that this isn't one of the biggest franchises on the entire planet and doesn't just continuously top the charts. I'm hoping that someday, in some style, it manages to get freaking a giant best-selling 10 million copy game, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. This is always going to be something that manages to be completely amazing in a tiny corner where no one notices it. And for that, I have to award it for being the absolute best game that nobody seems to play. Did your favorite unknown franchise not make the list? Got an idea for a future top 10? Leave it in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Woo boy, it is hot in here. Alright, I'm going to go play Ever Extend Extra and try to get my AC fixed. Oh, hey! I was just playing a little bit of Grand Theft Auto on my Darth Vader PSP. Are you curious what I'm going to come out with next? Well, if you click this button, you'll be subscribed to be the first to know. Also, if you click over here and here, you can see my latest review and my latest top 10. I promise, it was super good. Or it was really bad and I'm sure you can just make fun of me in the comments. Either way, it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching.